Hello, everybody. Now, clean air zones sound lovely. We all want clean air, and the air in the UK, as in most of Europe, most of the world, is very clean. But what is happening with these things called clean air zones is they're not so much about clean air. They are a continuation of the Agenda 2030 war on cars and vehicles. Now, I think by now most of you who watch this channel will be familiar with the plans in Oxford and Canterbury to introduce what they call 15-minute neighbourhoods, where they're going to zone the cities and prevent cars from going from one part of the city to the other without getting a massive fine. In Oxford's case, £100. So this is to try to stop people from using their cars and getting around, stop freedom. Something else is also happening, not just the 15-minute neighbourhoods, but this idea of clean air zones, which more and more cities in the UK have been implementing really by stealth or without really much attention at all, because I haven't heard many people talk about them. So we all know what's happening in London, I think, because the one that has got a lot of attention in London is called the ULEZ, or Ultra Low Emission Zone. So this was first implemented in 2019 by Sadiq Khan just in central London. And there were charges of £12.50 if your car was old or your vehicle was older. So if you have a petrol car that is pre-2005, you have to pay £12.50 to drive in central London. It's even worse if you've got a diesel car, because any diesel cars that are pre-2015, fairly new diesel cars, will have to pay £12.50. That was to drive in central London. But he's expanded it twice. So in 2021, he expanded the ULEZ up to cover all of inner London. So that's not just an area, that's about 2 miles across. It's an area about 10 miles across, and obviously much bigger diameter. And so, many more people live in that area. Next year, this year, because it's 2023, he's going to expand the ULEZ again to take in the whole of Greater London. So if you want to drive a car in London that is before those age cut-offs, you're going to have to pay £12.50 for the whole, just to drive your car in the whole of London. There's also another thing that covers lorries and buses and coaches and minivans and vans and so on, that's called the low emission zone, that already applies to the whole of Greater London. And get this, if you have a coach or a lorry, the charge there is £300 per day to drive your goods vehicle, your heavy goods vehicle or a coach into Greater London. So that's got a lot of attention. But what's been happening during the COVID era, where everyone's been sort of focusing on all the other things that are happening and fighting for our freedom and so on, is that a number of local authorities and councils around England and also Scotland have been introducing clean air zones. And this is done under the Transport Act 2000 and some fairly new regulations, which are called the Road User Charging Schemes Regulations 2013. So this is some secondary legislation that the government can just add to primary legislation without sort of having much parliamentary scrutiny. They do this all the time, and I think that's very, very undemocratic, to be honest. But under these regulations, under this act, local councils can introduce clean air zones and charge vehicles for driving in their whatever zone they designate as the zone in the cities that they are in charge of, and make a charge to drive in. So the ones that have them already are Bath, Birmingham, Bradford, Bristol and Portsmouth. And this year, 2023, there's going to be other new clean air zones in Tyneside, which is Newcastle and Gateshead, Sheffield, and the whole of Greater Manchester, I think. Well, Greater Manchester is the mayor of there. Andy Burnham, I think, is the mayor of Greater Manchester. So they'll decide what the area is, whether it's going to be the whole of Greater Manchester or just a part of it. But anyway, what happens is they can choose which vehicles will be restricted and have to pay a charge. Now, they don't all force cars to pay a charge. Some of them do. At the moment, Birmingham does. And so if you are a car driver and you want to drive into Birmingham's clean air zone, you have to pay £8 if your petrol car is before 2005 and your diesel cars before 2015, the same criteria. But if you are driving a coach, a bus, or an HGV, which is in the same criteria, actually, for all of them, it's just pre-2015. You have to pay £50 a day just to drive into Birmingham's clean air zone. If you don't pay and if you don't know about it, you get a fine through the post, and that can lead to problems. So what would happen if you have a vehicle? A lot of people don't even know about this. You got a vehicle, you drive to London, then you drive to Birmingham, then you drive to Manchester. You're going to have to pay 3 different charges for clean air zones on top of all the VAT and duty you pay for petrol and diesel, on top of your vehicle excise duty. And, this is just proliferating all over the country. So, and this is new. So we've already got 3 more this year. Who knows how many more they're going to introduce next year and the years after that. What they can do is they can decide whether they're going to have a zone which is Class A, Class B, Class C, or Class D. Class A only applies to coaches, buses, taxis, and private hire vehicles. Class B also includes heavy goods vehicles. Class C also includes vans and minibuses. Class D is the worst. That includes cars, and they can also have an option to include motorcycles in that as well. So, but what will happen, I think, at the moment, the only one that is Class D that restricts cars is Birmingham. Bath and Bradford are Class C, but as you go on, they're all going to go up a notch as the years go by. I mean, you can see this is inevitable until they all start charging cars for driving in the cities like London does, which is a disaster for the poorest people who can't afford a new car, and small businesses who can't afford a new van or a minibus. These charges are crippling, absolutely crippling. I mean, you think you have to pay £12.50 a day, 5 days a week maybe, just to go to work or just to go about your business. Well, that is £72.50 a week. And I don't know in my head how much that is a year, but it's going to be about £3,600, £3,700 a year of charges. I hope I've done that maths right. Please don't make fun of me in the comments if I've got my sums wrong. But it's going to be something like that a year if you just want to drive your car, 5 days a week in your own city. And you can't afford a new car. I mean, I myself, as I said in a previous video, my car sitting out there on the drive, you can't see it, but actually my window's there, my driveway's there. My car is from the last millennium, okay? So if I now want to drive my car up to Sidcup, where I used to live when I was a London Assembly member, I'll have to pay £12.50 from when this charge comes in later this year. So essentially, I won't do that anymore. I don't know what I'll do. I'll just have to meet people somewhere else if I want to do that. Because and obviously I don't go there very often, but people who their lives depend on it are going to be hammered by this. But of course, the people who make these rules, Sadiq Khan, he's got a salary of 152,000 a year. That was last year. It's probably gone up by now. So he doesn't have to worry about these charges, and the people that make them don't have to worry. It's an attack on ordinary working people under Agenda 2030, being brought in by stealth, by local governments in a way that people don't even really realise is going on. It's also happening in Scotland as well. Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee and Aberdeen have all introduced these zones last year. They haven't all started enforcing them yet, but I understand Glasgow's going to start enforcing this on cars this year in June, and the other cities are going to follow suit next year. So over the next year or two, more, a multiplicity of towns and cities that people could drive to freely and easily without worrying for the whole of time up until now. Suddenly they're putting massive restrictions on people driving and charges. Basically they're stopping a lot of people from driving into the cities because they're going to put charges on that people simply can't afford to pay. Now, what's the purpose of doing that? Because that will actually harm businesses who are set up in the city centres because they won't get so many customers. And what's going to happen? It's just a way, a mechanism to change society according to the plans of the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, the usual suspects, the Agenda 2030 minions and supporters, without consulting ordinary people, by circumventing democracy and putting in place new systems with new mechanisms that attack our freedom. And the ability to drive a car, cars are cheap, they are reliable technology, internal combustion engines are fantastic, but they work. And it's absolute insanity that some of the people and the powers that be want to just get rid of something that works and throw obstacles in everybody's way and make life more difficult for people. That's what's happening. And we need to stop this on a local level as well as a national level, because this is being implemented on a local level by local mayors, local councils in boroughs and districts around the country. And I'm just talking about the UK, but I imagine this is probably happening in other countries as well around the world. I mean, so you can sort of do your research on that. Hopefully you can look it up. I'm sure you'll find something if you're watching this from another country. I'm sure it's happening around the world too. Because these things all seem to be implemented together. We heard about the 15-minute neighbourhoods in Oxford and Canterbury, and then, the very next week, the World Economic Forum was publicising them in Paris and Melbourne and Milan. So, I'm sure that these are going on around the world as well. It's all part of an agenda where governments and local councils, through these international bodies of mayors like the C40 Cities Network, they use these fora. I'm a bit posh, you see, so I use Latin plurals sometimes. Fora. They are used to implement these Agenda 2030 policies in lockstep with each other all around the world. So be aware that this is happening. If you want your freedom, please join me in the Heritage Party. Stand in your local elections on the 4th of May. Let's get some councillors and we can oppose these things and overturn them and make sure people can stay free and they're still able to use their cars and their vehicles to get around like they always have done for the last couple of centuries, rather than allowing these globalist tyrants to ruin our way of life. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel as well. Thanks. God bless you all.